what my wife and I are able to leave to our descendants, that it grows over time. So such that we're able to generate generational wealth. And my goal, and it's part of the reason I still work a W-2, my goal is I don't want my grandchildren to have to work a W-2 unless they want to.
Welcome to the Share the Wealth Show, where minority professionals can learn to escape the racial wealth gap and catapult themselves into abundance. Your host, Nicole Pendergrass, grew her net worth from being negative to multiple six figures. Join her on her investigative mission to expose secret strategies of the wealthy so we can all have the tools needed to build the life and legacy we were created to possess. Now it's time for the show.
Hey guys, so we're back again. This is the second part of the episode with today's guest. I need you, if you have not heard part one, go back to the previous episode and listen to that first, and then come back and join us here today. But you're not going to want to miss what they already said, because then you'll be lost with what they're about to say. But in any case, you don't want to miss you need to hear the whole conversation. This is why we split into two parts. There's so many nuggets. It's so juicy. Go back and listen to the first part. People always say you don't need money to make money. You don't need your money, but you need somebody's money, right? So if you're not skilled at like talking to people and partnering and let them see what value you could bring to the table. So you either have to spend time and energy and do sweat equity to get the knowledge and skill set that is monetizable, you know what I mean? Or otherwise, who's going to partner with you and give you their capital if they can't trust that you know what you're doing, So
absolutely,
one way or the other, you got to put the work in. Okay.
Absolutely.
After you have been building wealth all this time and you have your properties, you have your stock portfolio, I'm sure you have other things for your family. So you have children. I know you're looking out for them as well. So what I really want to get into is, besides stocks and real estate, is there anything else that you put money into as like an asset? Because, we always talk about multiple streams, and then the protection side of it, because I know I heard you say something about trust before, and I love the idea of trust. Like, I'm in the middle of trying to get my trust together. And I just never know, like, how can I don't want my kids to ruin it, 20, 30, 40 years from now, but I don't even know what restrictions to put on it, or like, how should I form it so that, the distributions are maybe tapered, or I don't know. There's just so many different ways to kind of structure it. And so when I have too many options, it's hard for me to make a decision. So I like to see what other people are doing. So then I can like take bits and pieces from stuff that I like and kind of model after that. So I just want to hear, I know you have a trust and I want to hear about it.
Okay. And before I go into that, let me tell you this, and this is, when I found out that Chadwick Boseman did not have a will or a trust, I was floored. Aretha Franklin, no will, no trust. Prince, no will, no trust.
Prince didn't have a will or a trust?
Prince. The thing about it is our community traditionally does not do a very good job at estate planning. Part of it is because, a lot of folks in our community don't have a whole lot. But the thing about it is I've had folks in my family pass away where that part of the family couldn't even afford to bury them. So they're collecting money from the family. So I say all that to say this. I learned from all of these things. And I worked with a guy who his grandfather was the governor of Utah back in the 70s. This guy was, I don't know why he worked. Well, I understand why he works now, but I didn't before. He's worth like $50 million. Like, to have a W-2 job and be worth $50 million. I didn't understand at the time, but I understand now. He needed something to do. But he walked me through, like, his family had a family office set up in Utah. He lived here. And he walked me through how his grandfather established a Dynasty trust. And I'll talk about what that actually is in a second. But that Dynasty trust was set up in Utah and structured such that every descendant received a distribution, a quarterly distribution, but there were all of these provisions in place. if you worked and made 75% of median income, you got X amount. If you made 100% of median income, you got X amount. If you didn't work at all, you got the minimum. If you were disabled, you got max distributions. So he walked me through, like, if you wanted to start a business, you could get a loan from the trust. If you went to college, the trust would actually pay for your college if you finish. If you didn't, your college loans would be deducted from your future distributions. So the way it was structured was phenomenal. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, if you want to buy a house, another example, the trust would actually give you the down payment for your house. So, and also what was really interesting was his trust, I think back in the 70s when he started, it was like $50 million, and it grew to like 300 million or some astronomical number. But the way they structured their trust was only 35% of the total profits from the trust that the trust generated on an annual basis was actually distributed. 65% went back into the trust itself to accumulate additional assets. So that's how they were able to grow it year after year after year. And like I said, once it got to, if you're talking about, 50 million, $100 million, you can establish a family office at that point and hire like professional, professional fund managers to actually deploy that capital to the folks in your family. Like I said, once he laid it out, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. And what I really appreciated about it was, you have a lot of people that, they end up with sizable estates, and they give their heirs the entire estate at their passing. And what happens is you create these trust fund babies that have no real appreciation as to what it takes to actually build an estate that size. So they squander the money. So I wanted to make sure that what my wife and I are able to leave to our descendants, that it grows over time. So such that we're able to generate generational wealth. And my goal, and part of the reason I still work a W-2, my goal is I don't want my grandchildren to have to work a W-2 unless they want to.
Oh my God. Can you photocopy your trust and send it to me in the mail? Yeah. I'll send you my address because I'm so serious. That's crazy. And that all of those little details, that's what I wanted to know. That's what was missing. It's just like you hear general, okay, well, every child has to have a life insurance, a whole life policy. And then the trust gets that. But then how about the distributions? And for a business or for school or for something important, they get distributions, or maybe when they're 18, they get a certain amount, or, so there's all those, but it's still general. And I know it's really just depending on the person and how you want to set it up and tweak it. But I would love to see, I need to see details. I'm such a detail oriented person. And that's how I see the whole picture in my head, is once I know the details, then I can expand and see the whole picture. And just seeing you said, depending on how much you make, depends on how much distribution you get. But if you're disabled, then you'll get max distributions. And just all of that is so smart. And I know one of the things I was going to say that I heard somebody, to make sure that your heirs are kind of involved in the process, is that you can create a family trust, like a family, not a trust, but foundation that's like a nonprofit, and that the trust will give a certain percent to the nonprofit, and that the heirs have to be on the board of the nonprofit and be active in picking out who they are going to, what causes they're going to give to. And they have to research, they actually have to help with the discovery of that, because then that exposes them to people who are less fortunate. And if they don't participate in the foundation, then they can't participate in distributions from the trust. And I thought that was smart too, to kind of help, at least on that side, let your heirs see that there's still people who are needy in the world. And how are they going to see that if they're not exposed to that on a regular basis, especially once you make a certain amount of money? Right. Is that something you have in yours too?
Well, here's the thing. So far as charitable contributions are concerned, I have a section in the trust. A percentage of the trust actually is responsible for charitable contributions. So there is a component of that in the trust as well. And the way it's structured, there will always be an odd number of trustees and here's the other thing. Anybody that attempts to challenge the trust, as soon as they lose, and they will lose, they're out. So they're out. It's the way the trust is written. But the thing about it is Nicole, I actually went to an estate attorney, and we had 3 or 4 meetings where first thing was he gave me this huge worksheet of just questions. And like my wife and I had to go through those. And, then you have to define all of your assets. Then you have to define, how you want distributions work. Then you have to define provisions. So it's a process. Like make no mistake about it. But it's something that I feel, even if you don't have a whole lot of money, eventually it's important because it's the only true way that you can establish something that'll grow for your future heirs over time.
Yeah,
it's the only way. So at least, and here's the other thing too. Without some type of trust in place, depending on the state you're in, 3 to 8% of your trust is gonna be gone in probate, and just taxes and fees associated with probate, just right off the top. Then there's going to be taxes so far as the transfer is concerned too. So what a dynasty trust allows you to do is to define, the trust in a way where you can sidestep, generational tax. Now, granted, distributions come as income, and that's a whole nother thing. Oh, by the way, none of this is financial advice. Please contact a qualified financial advisor, contact an estate professional. I'm just telling you what I've done. So, this is not something that you just want to, look at some YouTube videos and try to do. You need legal help in order to establish that. Now, mine is actually established in California, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. But there are other states. Typically, the way these dynasty trusts work, they don't go on in perpetuity. Meaning, here in California, it's 20 years after the passing of your youngest descendant is the way it works. So, let's say my wife and I are gone at that point, and let's just say my granddaughter has a child. So it's going to be 20 years after my great grandchild passes, the trust itself gets dissolved. But I've also structured in the trust, and I encourage everybody to do this because my buddy told me that his grandfather did this. His grandfather actually shot a video, Brewster's Million style, where he talked to future generations.
That's what I wanted to do too.
About why he set the trust up, the intent, and what his expectations were going forward. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So the way, and there's a letter in my trust too. What I'm hoping is that my future heirs, after we're long gone, will actually create another trust and allow that to go in perpetuity. Or, you can establish a trust in Wyoming, for instance. Wyoming provides you the ability to establish a dynasty trust in perpetuity.
Why is that? Just because of the state laws are different?
State
okay.
Law.
So then why did you decide California? Because
we live here. We live here. All our assets, well, at the time, most of our assets were here. So, we had an estate attorney here. So it just made sense. And the thing about it is this is the difficult part about a dynasty trust, because while my wife and I are alive, it's revocable, meaning, if somebody is acting up, we can put you out. But once we pass, it automatically becomes irrevocable. What that means then is the provisions have to be written in a way where they're open enough to deal with, things that happen in the future. I mean, imagine this. My buddy's grandfather he established their trust before the internet, right? So the internet changed everything. So if he had limited, like, for instance, what you could invest in, he would have completely, blocked the ability to invest in so many different things. So it's one of the things you have to consider with the Dynasty Trust. It has to be written in a way where you try to at least consider what can happen in the future. And, you want to make the trust flexible enough so that it can adapt somewhat.
Okay. And then even if your trust is in perpetuity or not, your kids or a few descendants down could still create their own trust and model it after yours. Like, so they can always start their own, and just like for whatever their lineage is. Because I understand that the trust is investing, especially with the way his is set up, is 35% is distributed, 65% goes back into the trust. And then he has people like investing that. Like, trust money's not just sitting in a bank account. They're actually investing that money's just owned. Those assets are owned by the trust. So that's how it grows. But then like generations can get really big. Like if you started with 2, you have 2 kids, they have 2 to 4 kids, they each have 2 to 4 kids. Like it just keeps going and going and going. Like how can you invest? Like how much is each descendant getting? Is it direct descendant? Is it only kids? What about spouses? Like, I just like, if you adopt a kid, there's so many different ways
Adoptions
that could be split. When you get to a certain level, then like you're getting like $1 because there's not enough money.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned that's something that is actually in the provisions. Adopted children are treated the same way as biological children in our trust. Now, here's the other thing, though. Husbands or wives, spouses of descendants are not entitled to distributions unless they still have children that are under 18. And this is something my wife and I kind of went round and round about. So what that means then is one of my heirs, who's a direct descendant of mine, were to pass away, and their spouse remained, and they had children that were under 18, they would continue to get their spouse's distributions. After those children turn 18, they don't get anything.
So then at that point, the children now get the distributions instead because they're the direct descendant.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, there's so much in my head. Oh my gosh, it's like so much to think about.
I think it took us about 2 months to 2 months and 3 to 4 meetings with the estate attorney to get everything fleshed out, because we'd go in and he would ask, oh, what about this or what about that? And like I said, my wife and I we went round and round on some of these things, but ultimately we were able to kind of compromise on what we thought was generally fair for the family. And it doesn't matter, like, if my son will soon have 2 children. My other children don't have any. It's spread equally across, regardless to which lineage you actually fall under. So if my oldest ends up having 10 kids, well, there's 10 more heirs to the distribution list. So
basically
really
now the pot is split. The more kids, the pot gets smaller for each kid because it's just split equally between all the kids. And what about, so there's kids and then there's grandkids. So do the kids get more than the grandkids, or all heirs between kids and like your kids and then their kids? So even though they're the parents, they still get the same cut as their kids?
Yep.
Wow. Well, so if you don't grow that pot, your portion gonna get smaller and smaller. So you better be happy that 65% is going back into the trust and that somebody's managing it correctly so that it can really grow. Do you have life insurance into this as well?
Uh-huh. Yep.
So what does that look like?
Pretty much the trust owns everything now.
Does every kid have to have life insurance?
Yep.
That goes into the trust?
Yep. The trust actually pays for that.
The trust pays for the life insurance.
Mm-hmm. It's a provision. And the trust is beneficiary of that as well.
It pays for it and is the beneficiary. It should be beneficiary.
Yeah. Yep.
And then that goes back into the pot of the 35-65 split.
That's right.
Well, you didn't pay for the life insurance, so why should you get the money anyway?
Exactly. The trust is my wife and I's beneficiary too.
Wait, what? Say that again.
My wife and I have insurance policies. The trust is the beneficiary of our.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I have a life insurance policy. The trust is not yet the beneficiary of it. This is just all the paperwork because I opened it before I had the trust, the policy before I had the trust. So this is just like all the paperwork you have to go back through and changing stuff around. And you just can't procrastinate because you just don't know how much longer I can have all these ideas. Something happens to me tomorrow, knock on wood, it's still got to go through probate, even though I wanted to have this, like the intent doesn't matter. Legally, it has to be signed and notarized and put on paper. And oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I do the bulk of my investing through my LLC, and the LLC is owned by the trust. So once again, and that was because it was kind of, I would get, dinged from the attorney. Anytime I needed to add anything to the trust, I'd get a bill. Because that's what attorneys do. So I asked, I'm like, well, what if I just started using my LLC to, for these acquisitions and some of the investments? It goes off. Yeah. The trust would indirectly own, since the trust owns the LLC, then everything the LLC owns, the trust owns. So just a little tip there.
I don't know. I think I heard, okay. So that was one of my things. I guess the reason I didn't do that was because I heard about like, you have to get the trustees permission to do anything, but that's not, if it's irrevocable, you can still do whatever you need because you're technically are you the trustee of your trust right now?
Yeah. My wife and I are the trustees of the trust. And right now the trust is revocable. So we can make changes in it
whenever you
want, as much as we want right now. Yep. Now, once we go to the upper room, then it's going to be, then it becomes locked down.
All right. So what if you have multiple LLCs with different tax designations because they're treated differently for tax reasons? So how are you filing taxes with the trust? Like the trust has to file taxes?
I file taxes. I mean, the trust is essentially the owner of the LLC, but I still file taxes because I take salary from the LLCs. So there's still a tax liability for me because I'm actually operating the LLCs themselves.
So the salary that you get from the LLC that is owned by the trust, so the trust is basically paying you to operate the LLC that it owns. But the trust itself does not need to file a tax return.
Contact your tax professional on that.
I know. Oh my God.
Contact your tax professional on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Contact your,
I will.
I do not.
We have to talk soon anyway. Oh my gosh. I mean, me and my tax professional. This can get really complicated. And you know what? This is why people don't do it. Because they don't feel like dealing with it, but it's just so crucial. It's so critical to have these conversations, to know this information, know what should be in there. And even if you can't do everything, at least like get a blanket one that like you are good with. If this happens, if something happens to me tomorrow, I'm good with this for now. And I will add to it little by little as I keep living. Right?
Yeah. I mean, having some type of structure in place to ensure that your assets are handled properly. I think it's a responsibility of anybody that has a family. So, I mean, and that's just my opinion. Some folks, I guess they figure they'll worry about it, when their family will worry about it when they're gone. For me, this is the gift, my parents have a trust. They don't have a Dynasty trust set up the way I do. But that's okay. My parents don't want to, you mentioned the work. They didn't want to go through all of the headaches. So it's just, it's kind of a straight line. but it works for them. So everybody has to do what works for them. My goal is generational wealth, period. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes now to make sure that happens. Oh, one thing too, by the way, I'm probably going to have to establish another trust in the next few years. There's a limit on Dynasty Trust. It's I think it's like $11.5 million right now. Before you start encountering, I think it's GSTT, basically the tax to descendants.
The gift tax,
change.
right? The
gift tax,
inheritance or gift tax.
Yep. So
I didn't know that trusts were subject to that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If the way the trust is structured, I think it's the term for it is it's like generational skipping. There's no requirement that the trusts have to skip generations. But the thing about it is you want to make sure you're able to bypass gift tax, estate tax, in order to make sure that your descendants get the most that they possibly can. And like I said, I think in 2020, it was like 11.5 million. I think it's going to go up with inflation, but it's just something to keep in mind. And that's part of the reason why, like I said, when we get to that point, then I'll be looking at some other options, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Oh my God. I could talk to you forever. It's already, this episode I already know is going to get cut in half because this is too long, but it is okay because I cannot stop a conversation that has so much information in it. Because even if you say, okay, let's cut it and let's come back on, it doesn't have that same energy. You're in the middle of the flow. Like, just keep going. This is fantastic. And between this and the other interview I did with Portia, I don't know if you listened to that one, but she was really good too with all her information on generational estate planning and that kind of thing. There's so much to know and I just can't get enough. Like, this is great information. And everyone listening, guys, y'all, I hope y'all had y'all pen and paper ready. I'm gonna have to warn people when I do the intro to have their pen and paper ready, because I was writing down stuff and I'm gonna have to re-listen to this again and I'm gonna be hitting you up for more information.
Anytime.
I might have to come out to California and just spend a week there, and every day we go through. I'm gonna bring my trust documents. Don't worry, I'll buy you. We'll do it over Montana's.
Okay. Yeah. Here's the thing. Wealth building does not happen overnight.
Yes.
It does not. In our space, this is really for anybody that's just getting started in multifamily. Be patient in what it is that you're doing. Gino says it all the time. In real estate is a get rich slow plan. And, the thing about it is you just got to get started. You just have to get started. And as it relates to structuring things, start small. Maybe you start with a will and then you transition into a trust, and then you transition into a dynasty trust. Just putting in the work to start thinking about estate planning and future generations, it feeds on itself. You will want to be better and better and better. You will look for more opportunities to improve your overall estate. So just get started.
Oh, you know what? There's no better way to end that. Like that's a great note. We can't keep sitting down on the information. We got to start implementing one foot in front of the other. I think people like to think of they have to do this huge leap, and it's not like that at all. It's needlepoint movements, and then that's what creates the picture. Wait, don't go yet. Have you been looking for a way to get started in real estate investing, but you just don't know how? You need the Launchpad. It's brought to you by my company, Norvest Holdings. And the Launchpad is a free guide with a ton of resources I've compiled to help you invest into your first real estate syndication. It includes terminology, book resources, video explanations, all the information that you need. Don't know what a syndication is? I got you covered. How to find a good operator, how to even tell if a deal is good or not without having to know how to underwrite it all. It's all in there. The Launchpad is designed to help launch you into the next stage of your investing career and get you invested into your first multifamily syndication as a passive investor, meaning you can be a landlord and own a piece of a large apartment building, but still go about your day-to-day life without having to stop and learn every single detail about what's under the hood and how it all works. The link to the guide is in the show notes. Make sure you sign up today. Again, this is a free resource and guide. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me. Now let's finish up the show. Absolutely. Okay, so we are going to wrap. Oh my gosh, I don't want to wrap. But anyway, final 3 questions that I ask every guest. First, I know you just mentioned Warren Buffett, but he also said, on top of not losing money, he said, diversification is a hedge against ignorance. So what do you think that means? Is that good or bad? Should people diversify or shouldn't they?
Okay. I'm going to tell you what I do. Then I'm going to tell you what I think most folks should do. It's a little different. I think it depends on the asset class, generally speaking, because he doesn't just invest in one asset class, right? He invests in stocks. They buy, vacant land. I mean, they, hedge funds, like they do all kinds of stuff. But at least for me, when I feel like I have enough information, what I'm looking for is the best possible risk-adjusted return. And I let that be my guide in anything that I do. For most people, honestly, picking stocks is a horrible idea. They're going to suck at it. You're going to watch the market go up and go down, and you're going to be biting your fingernails, and it's not going to work. So for most people, I'm going to be Dave Ramsey here. I'm just going to say, for most people, if you want to invest in the stock market, buy a total market index fund, put the money in, don't worry about it. VTI or something similar, put the money in, don't worry about it. Now, I say that, but for me, I probably from an equity standpoint, probably 90% Tesla. But on a risk-adjusted basis, it makes sense for me. But I also spend a lot of time looking at markets. I spend a lot of time understanding companies. So it's a little different, but generally speaking, I believe in consolidation within an asset class, but I believe in diversification across asset classes. It's the reason I'm not 100% of my total net worth in Tesla. It's, if you wanted to break it out, I am 75% real estate in some shape, form, or fashion. Either, multifamily, self-storage, senior living, and then, equities and notes and, and I'm investing in business. I invest in businesses as well. But generally speaking, to your question, for most people are ignorant. They don't spend the time that it takes to truly understand all of the variables in an asset class. So that's why diversification makes sense. There. Long answer to a very short question.
Long answer, but that's very true. Diversification makes sense because people are ignorant and they can learn, but it takes a lot of time and energy to learn, and people don't really want to do that. Or they have time, they're spending time on other things. So, but I like that. Okay, that thought process. All right, next question. You played Monopoly?
Yep.
Before? All right. Between Baltic or Boardwalk, which property are you buying first in your strategy to win, and why?
I want to buy Marvin Gardens because I want a B-class asset. But if I have to pick the two, that's just me.
That is not the question.
I want cash flow and appreciation.
True.
But I'm a Boardwalk guy. My risk tolerance, even at this advanced age, is still relatively high. Like I structure my overall portfolio in a way where I can feed that need to take risk, and I'm protected by quality assets where there's not nearly the volatility.
That makes sense. So you buy Boardwalk so you can be risky in other areas because Boardwalk's the safer asset. Nice. I haven't heard that answer yet. Good one. I like that. Okay.
You got to know yourself.
That's very true. Very true. Lastly, this is a semi-newish question, but where do you see in your goals for, the immediate future, next year or two, what would catapult your career or your investing objectives the highest? It would kind of just transform or take you to the next level. What would you need to, because you never know who's listening. What do you need to get to the next level?
Wow, that is a great question. It's something I think about a lot. And honestly, it's part of the reason I started really focusing on raising capital. The one thing I've learned, my company, Freeman Equity, we started off as kind of, syndicators, but we've kind of transitioned into more of the private equity capital raising space. So for me, it's more capital. It's pretty simple. I think I do a pretty good job at identifying quality assets. So the big thing is obviously the bigger the stick, the harder you hit. So I'm looking for, the bigger your capital stack, the more leverage you're able to get. And, it's like anything else. I think it's Archimedes that said, you give me a lever big enough and I can move the entire world. So more capital for sure.
Nice.
Or access to.
More access too.
Yep.
All right. Perfect. I love it. And finally, how can people reach out to you if they want to take you up on your free trading advice offer, or just reach out in general about what you're doing in real estate or anything else?
I'm everywhere. I'm posting more. Again, I'm getting back on my posting cycle, but you can reach me on Facebook at Travis Gibson or Freeman Equity on Instagram, Freeman Equity on Twitter, Freeman Equity on TikTok. I'm even trying to do the TikToks now. So yeah, Freeman Equity is probably the best way, or, you can hit me at Travis Gibson on Facebook. I have the Take Profits or Don't group. You can jump in there and ask questions and go from there.
Perfect. Wow, this episode was insane. Thank you so much for joining us and talking with us for so long, taking time out of your busy schedule this evening. So I really appreciate it. I'm so glad you were able to come on.
Thank you for having me. You know what? I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss this one. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate you doing an amazing job. Keep it going.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Well, that is a wrap, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you for joining us again today. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Did you love this episode of Share the Wealth Show? Be sure to connect with Nicole by following her on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. If you picked up any of the gems that were dropped by today's guest, make sure you not only put them in your bag, but if you know of someone who would benefit from this information, don't keep it to yourself. Share the wealth and make sure to leave us a rating and review. We'll see you for next week's episode. Subscribe so you'll be notified.